I give you greetings from sunny Southern California. We'll call the roll of who's here, starting with Clark.
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here. Deirdre, you're up.
Deirdre Hobson here.
Chris Flex here.
Okay, great. All right, so, and also with us is Lauren Lind, our planner, and Carolyn Murray, our town council. And taking notes for us in the background is Angela Giso. Thank you for all being here. Our first item, let me pull up my agenda for a moment. Where did it go? First item is the wharf project, correct? 46 Border Street. And we have closed that hearing. We will not be taking any more evidence, but we have a draft decision to review. Lauren has distributed that to us this afternoon, and we also had a separate set of comments on conditions from our peer reviewer at Weston and Sampson. Is anybody from Weston and Sampson going to present that tonight, Lauren, or are we just going to look at it?
No, we don't have Weston and Sampson here tonight for this project.
Okay. All right, so I'm assuming everybody on board is taking a look at both things. I do want to incorporate a lot of what Weston and Sampson.
Tom, I think you're breaking up a little. If you could maybe just lean into your microphone more, maybe.
All right. I'm sorry about that. I do want to make sure we incorporate some of Weston and Sampson's proposed conditions into this agreement. But let's get started with parking. And Lauren, if you could, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could explain what the zoning board decided, because none of us have seen the zoning board decision. And I don't necessarily want us to be at cross purposes with them about parking.
But Tom, regrettably, I actually haven't seen the zoning board decision. I was out last week and I have tried to reach out to my colleague in town who's not working currently. So, but Adam Brodsky, the attorney for the applicant, is here and was there through all the zoning board hearing meetings. So he would be able to give you more succinct information about how that turned out.
As was I, Mr. Chairman. So however you want to proceed with that.
Well, Carolyn, why don't you, no offense, Adam, Carolyn, why don't you summarize it if you could?
Give me one moment. I'm just trying to call up the zoning board decision.
And specifically on the issue of parking, because I believe the rest of their jurisdiction does not overlap with ours.
All right, so pulling up the final ZBA decision. They did have some extensive conditions regarding parking. And I do think, Mr. Chairman, that some of the planning board's proposed conditions might be a bit in conflict with the planning board, with the zoning boards. So for example, it's a long decision, give me a moment. So with respect to the parking, the board ultimately applied the one space for every 3 seats with respect to the restaurants and 1 space per 80 square feet of public floor area, and found that, although they are disappointed that there is no explicit provision in the zoning bylaw for employee parking. They noted that the ZBA was able to reach an agreement with the applicant that they will do this traffic and parking assessment, and it has to be done after they're commercially operational, and it has to include a season for the summer. And also that they are going to try to locate off-site parking for 10 employees. I can go through the parking parameters if you'd like.
Well, let's just cut to it. And you know, we saw what Weston and Sampson suggested, and I guess I was the only one of the members of the board who suggested some conditions, and I thought it should be mandated that there be offsite employees for both, not only for employees, but for overflow of users of the restaurant after 5 p.m. at night when there's going to be the intense use of the restaurant. Weston and Sampson pointed out that there has to be ownership or control, so my condition would have something about proof of a lease of an offsite spot.
And if I could interrupt, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
I'll read part of the ZBA's, like I said, they've got multiple parking conditions here, but one of them is the applicant and the board have reached agreement that as a condition of the special permit, the applicant must provide 10 designated off-site spaces for employee parking, which may also be used for customer valet parking whenever demand exceeds the capacity of its 35 on-site spaces, as demonstrated by the on-site parking congestion. And these 10 spaces must be available for use prior to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy.
That sort of gets the same gist of what I was on for. So I have no problem, you know, adopting their language on that if they've discussed that with the applicant in more detail than we have. Another condition I had was concern that there be signage on site to deter the people who are going to be the patrons of the Salt House next door. The public may have gotten used to using the Atlantica lot while it was empty, and I want to be sure we don't have Atlantica's capacity taken up, the wharf's capacity taken up by people from an adjoining business. So, you know, I think that's just something that the applicant and the Salt House owners are going to have to work out. But, you know, I don't think signage is just a minimal, I think, requirement to deal with that issue. So I don't know if there's a problem with that, but I think. Did the zoning board say anything?
I wish this was a searchable document that I've got, because I thought there was a requirement that that they put some signage up. I don't want to hold the board up. I don't know if Adam is able to put his fingers on that a little more quickly.
Mr. Chairman, Adam Brodsky on behalf of the applicant. I don't believe that there's a signage requirement. We have no objection to it, but actually the ZBA is requiring that we have a parking attendant available during peak business hours, Thursday through Sunday evenings, presumed, and such other times as the owners may determine, to ensure that on-site parking is used by its patrons and customers only, and that this will be reviewed at the same time that the ZBA is requiring a parking study after 6 months. So we have no problem with additional signage, but in fact, the ZBA's requirements are more stringent.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I don't want to be at cross purposes with what they're doing, and so I'm fine with adopting the language of their decision as ours, subject to what the rest of the members think. But and you know, including the study, I think that would be worthwhile to do. And as long as that overflow parking is for customers as well as employees, I am good with that. Anybody else on the board have a thought about the parking issue? Clark, I'll start with you.
Okay, Clark.
No, I mean, like you've already mentioned, the ZBA has covered it in more detail.
Yeah. All right. Deirdre, did I see your hand flying up?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I echo the same comments Clark said. I think ZBA has covered it in detail. I did hear a little about what was put in that condition. So I'm comfortable with echoing their enforcement. It seems more detailed and we have a place to put it, so.
Okay. All right, Chris or Kevin, anything on the parking issue?
Nothing to add, thank you.
I'm just going to add that I'm glad to see that there's the requirement. And is that indefinite, or is the requirement for an attendant as described by Attorney Brodsky just until a parking study is completed and then it's reviewed at that time? And who on the town side would review that? I need some clarification on what that is.
I think that's what it was said, that it would be until the study, and the study is a requirement of the zoning board special permit. So it'll be the zoning board is going to look at it. To the extent that it affects our site plan, you know, we may, I think we should make it a condition that that study be submitted to us as well. And then we can judge at the time whether we have to do any amendments to the site plan permit that we're giving tonight. So.
Well, one other thing too, Mr. Chairman, is that one of the conditions of the zoning board decision is that the applicant's required to purchase and operate one or more shuttle vehicles to provide the year-round shuttle service as necessary. But you're absolutely right. All of this comes back to the ZBA and can't be altered unless the ZBA agrees to it.
So for purposes of our decision tonight, at least on this parking issue, let's just say incorporate the ZBA's decision to make reference to the specific sections of the ZBA decision and take out those two of those blue highlight things. My other issue about parking was the configuration that we spoke about before we closed the hearing of the handicap spaces, and I believe that our peer review agreed with that in suggesting a condition that we not have this L-shaped configuration of spaces. So when I looked at the plan, spaces 4 through 8 all are close to the entrances of these buildings and would be an appropriate location. And I'm okay if one of them moves, but one or both, but just the L, you know, our own peer review is saying the L-shaped configuration of the handicap spaces just isn't going to work. So I'll open that up to the board as well as what your thoughts are about those handicap spaces. Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I made comment about it before that the access, the striped space on the plan, access for handicap parking spots can be shared according to the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board. If you were to change it to be in line and by the front door or closer to the front door, it would take 3 spots because you would need an access aisle that could be shared plus 2 spots. So that would take up 3 spots, where now as it's in the corner, using the corner for access aisle, it only uses 2. So it would be a net result or a loss, net result losing 1 parking space on site.
Yeah, but isn't the minimum requirement to have 2 available and accessible handicap spots, which our own experts are telling us if 1 space is filled, it's possible the other one could be inaccessible.
Well, I don't think that's the case. In particular, the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board allows shared access aisle. So I don't see anything here that looks like that would be precluded. With the corner, it's a net loss of one parking spot, and where the parking spots are precious.
Okay. Anybody else's thoughts on that? Do you have a consensus one way or the other?
If I could also just ask, Mr. Chairman, I know parking is precious on the site, but and again, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but if this results in a net loss of 1 parking space on site, then I believe that throws them out of compliance with the parking requirement.
All right, understood. All right, anybody else on the board?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
All right, well then, we'll leave that as according to the plan and not have any condition regarding it. All right, on the rest of the Weston, anybody else? Well, let's go over the Weston and Sampson. After parking, they brought up a condition about driveway widths. Yes, who said so? Oh, sorry. But the bylaw does not allow for a driveway being greater than 24 feet. And then their comment is the proposed wider than allowed driveway does not appear needed to enter the parking lot. So again, my inclination here is to go with what our peer review requires and the bylaw requires, which is no opening in excess of 24 feet. Anybody else on the board have thoughts about that?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. That was one of my first comments, that the driveway aisle width might prohibit some on-street parking. So I agree with you on that.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree, Tom.
Okay. Kevin or Chris, anything?
Tom, I'm looking at the project booklet, and at least one of those, and it looks like it's the longer of the two. It's just a funny angle coming in off of Border Street. So I'll just say I don't feel as strongly about reducing the size of the driveway, because it looks like the size of the driveway might have been that way intentionally to accommodate the awkward entry off of Border Street.
Okay. Adam, we're not going to take comment about it. So, all right. The board's inclination then is to stick to the bylaw's requirement of 24 feet by at least 4 to 1 of us. All right, Lauren, if you can incorporate that the widths will be no greater than 24 feet. Parking lot lighting. They mentioned that the applicant should consider cutoff light fixtures in the area of the site adjacent to Water Street to reduce the amount of light spillage. Is that a huge, that one I'll ask you, Adam, is that a huge problem?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. No, we have proposed dark sky compliant lighting. If I can just remind the board, and I know you've already addressed the driveway issue, Weston and Sampson simply requested or suggested that you waive that requirement. Those are existing driveways. They're existing non-conforming driveways. We're not proposing to change them. They do have a function. You heard our engineers say why it's necessary, but I believe Weston Sampson said that it doesn't comply, but you should consider waivers. We don't think we need waivers because we're maintaining the existing non-conforming openings. But if you're going to require 24 feet, then I request that the board consider granting a waiver of that to maintain those openings. Thank you.
We've discussed this before, Carolyn, correct me if I'm wrong, unless there's something specific in the bylaw about a waiver, we do not grant waivers. There's no provision in the bylaw to grant waivers.
That is correct. And I don't see anything in the site plan review that gives you any authority to grant a waiver.
Well, I just pulled up the plan. If the driveway aisle's 24 feet and the diagonal where it hits the public way is longer than that, you know, it's a tale of two geometries. It's not a normal orthogonal geometry where it hits Border Street.
Meaning we keep it as it is, or do we restrict it to 24 feet?
Well, I mean, the drive aisle within the property is 24 feet, but then where it hits the property line at Border Street, it's the diagonal resultant of that 24 foot. I mean, if they made the drive aisle 28 feet on their property, then I guess we'd be talking about something. But where it hits that diagonal geometry of Border Street, I think it just is what it is. I mean,
well, let's call a spade a spade. It's not compliant at where it meets the street. According to,
if it's pre-existing, Carolyn, what's our leeway here?
If it's pre-existing, then with all due respect, it isn't anything for this board to fix. That would have been something that And the zoning board did address a number of things in their special permit that included non-conforming parking on the site. And I think that would have extended to the drive aisle.
All right. And we'll leave it to the zoning board decision if they took it up. All right. And the lighting, what else do we have? Erosion controls, bylaw compliance. All right, so they're recommending a traffic or parking study, which is, I assume all these issues of traffic, sidewalks, the whole bit that Weston and Sampson is mentioning is part of the scope of the zoning board's parking study that they're requiring. Is that correct? Would I be correct in saying that? That one you can answer, Adam.
Yes, sir. And in fact, I mean, it's much more detailed. I'm trying to put my hands on it.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
I have it right here. Actually, we're supposed to come back in 6 months. But if it doesn't, the first 6 months doesn't include a full summer season, then we have to come back in after the first full summer season. The study is conducted by a traffic engineer or firm selected by and under the guidance of the planning director. Applicant shall fund and provide the board a similar study of traffic and parking analysis following the first 2 years of commercial operations. The study may be also ordered by the board at other times if a pattern of complaints or observations are received from the police department or the director of permitting with respect to traffic and parking conditions. And then following the receipt of the study is required hereunder, the board shall review such traffic and parking impact study. And if supported by the report, the board shall hold a public hearing to consider any modifications to the special permit decision.
Okay.
So,
all right, that's fine. And again, Lauren, we'll just incorporate their decisions regarding the zoning board's decisions regarding parking and traffic study and similar language that if it requires, it'll be submitted to this board, and if it requires amendment to the site plan, we'll address that at the time. A couple of other just things I'm noticing in their Weston and Sampson comments, 2.13, 2.15, and 2.22. There, in all those cases, it just seems to be, adding some things on the plans, and if pollution is discovered, to report it to this board, since we would have jurisdiction. So I don't have a problem. I don't know if anybody has a problem in just incorporating those three suggestions from the Weston and Sampson. Is everybody on the board okay with all that?
Sure.
All right. So Lauren, did you get all of that and understand how you would be amending what you put before us tonight?
Yes, I'm live editing here. I just am making some notes for myself. I will elaborate more and run this to council, but I've eliminated the first two conditions that were in the section that you had sent over. I will mimic ZBA's parking conditions. You have the note to the study here. Did you want to include the signage section? I had heard earlier that you had.
If that's incorporated in the zoning board's decision, that'll fall within that. I mean, I would make just a general condition that the planning board is, adopting the zoning board's decision with regard to parking, signage related to parking.
You're gonna have
an attendant related to parking, and the parking study. And then just say which study will you have it in the previous one will be submitted to the board at the time. Okay. And then I would just add here that we're going to adopt the Weston and Sampson recommendations 2.13, 2.15, and 2.22. Yes, which you seem to have. Okay. With that done, and everybody will see the final written copy and need to go to the office to sign it. Can I entertain a motion to enter these conditions as we've drafted them?
Hey, Tom, there was one other thing that I think was hanging out there, and that was that the town has a committee to study parking in the public way. And that I feel strongly that while it might not be worked out timing wise, for this decision, that the applicant should be encouraged to work with that committee to create as many on street public way parking spots as is possible. Should be encouraged to work with the town.
Beyond the statement of encouragement, I don't know that we can put anything else in the decision, but when we get to when they submit the parking study to the zoning board and to our board, yeah, there's nothing that will prevent us from sharing for comment with others.
Sure.
No one has a real problem about putting in an encouragement statement in our decision. I don't.
I think I got most of that. You are still breaking up, Tom.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to, traveling a long way. My voice is traveling a long way. So, all right. With that, with those changes, can I entertain a vote on approving the decision as edited, subject to Lauren's final drafting? We'll start with Clark. So moved. All right. Second. Thank you, dear. Thank you. All right. Roll call. Clark.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye. Oh, sorry, Tom.
That's all right.
Go ahead.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
And Hein, aye.
Chris Plex, aye.
Yes, and I guess again, I can just confirm that Lauren reminded me we need to confirm these things when Kevin votes. Is Kevin voting officially since Amy is not here tonight, or is Kevin vote advisory?
You can designate as chair to have Kevin vote as Amy's not here.
All right. Well, I'll so designate, and we have a 5-0 vote on the conditions. So, Mr. Brodsky, Mr. Sullivan, thank you, and good luck with the project. And I guess we'll see you in 6 months to a year with a study, and go from there.
Thank you very much for all your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck with the project.
Yep. Thank you. Good luck. All right, now, again, I don't have my agenda in front of me, but disappeared in Lava Land. So next is the 80 North Main Street, correct?
No, sorry, next is the Beechwood, site.
My side, and the address, my apologies. 520, what is it? Lauren, the address?
It is
534 Beechwood and
534
32
Beechwood.
And 32 Jones Street.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. All right. So who do we have with us tonight?
We have Brendan Sullivan here from Cavanero Consulting. I see Susan Hoadley is in the audience. I'll pull her up. And I believe their attorney, Richard Henderson, had noted that he would not be able to attend tonight. Is that correct, Brendan?
That is correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Away.
All right. Let me just see who's here. Anybody from our side Jim
Reardon
is here for this? Okay, so Lauren, where were we?
We did not do a peer review on this, actually.
Oh, okay, fine. So where did we leave off last time? Just bring us up to date.
The applicant had requested a continuation. The new documents that we had received were a letter from attorney Richard Henderson explaining sort of the changes that they had gone through, as well as a revised architectural plans that showed the access to the building that had been submitted by Hoadley Martinez Architects.
Okay.
That's right. handicap access.
All right, then we need Brendan and Susan to present that to us officially. Either one of you want to take away and share the screen? Feel free.
Sure. I'll share my screen. I can here. I thought I had it pulled up. I'm sorry. 131. There we go. So you can see the plan up in front of you now. That's the proposed conditions for 534 Beechwood Street. From the last meeting, a couple of comments you had. One of them was we did additional topography and survey to pick up kind of the east side of Beechwood Street of the intersection, to pick up the existing island that's there, the crosswalk that crosses where the playground is, and some of that detail as well. And since then, we met with Brian Joyce, the town engineer, about placement of the crosswalks that we proposed. So we're proposing one that crosses Beechwood Street, just about at the intersection. The lines will have to be, the stop lines, the stop bars will have to be repainted as well, to apply with the MUTCD, because a stop bar is supposed to be no closer than 4 feet from a crosswalk. So if this, and these crosswalks, the final exact determination will, the final exact location will be coordinated with DPW and Brian Joyce as well. But in a general manner, we're going to cross Beechwood Street, going over to Doan Street on the north side of the property, and also crossing Doan Street at this approximate location, just the other side of the stop bar, to connect a gravel path to the existing gravel path and gate that goes to the ball fields. And this will be connected with a paved sidewalk that goes in front of the building, in front of the existing proposed structure all along Beechwood Street. We've also added there was a comment about adding a split rail fence. We did add a split rail fence in this location from about the entrance north up to about where the crosswalk will be. And then we've also added 3 light locations. One in this location here, which is just in front of the handicap accessible spaces. One in this location here, the corner of the parking lot, and the rear corner adjacent to Church Street. 3 locations. They will be dark sky compliant. The rest of the lighting on the site will be like sconces off of the building itself, and they'll be dark sky compliant and shielded as well. And I think that's about it that I had. I don't know if Susan wants to go over the handicap accessible route that I believe you requested as well.
Okay.
Is it up? Very good. Can you all see a new drawing called AS100?
Yes.
Good, good. So this is the accessible route diagram that we generated at the request of Ms. Glassmeyer. The route as you see it is shown in the pink dots. It begins at the handicap accessible parking space, and the accessible route continues along the sidewalk, regardless of a change in material, which is still accessible. It goes up the ramp and onto the deck. And as you can see, we have an accessible route into the main part of the general store, on into accessible bathrooms, and back out to the space, which is the service area for JJ's Ice Cream.
Okay.
That seems clear.
Yep. It's probably one of the clearer drawings we've had in a while, which is great. All right. Is that it for you two guys? We'll open it up to any board comments right now. Clark, I'll start with you. Do you have any comments about this?
In terms of what was submitted this time, you know, again, the accessibility route very often gets left off of architectural and engineering drawings. So I think it was reasonable to ask for it, and it's a reasonably simplistic diagram, but it's important that everybody understands that it's a continuous route to and from handicap accessible parking to a facility. The sidewalk and crosswalk cross Doan Street. I don't have any comment on what the engineer has on their drawing. Seems straightforward enough. I did read Attorney Henderson's letter, and then there was another letter in the file that I also read, but I can't remember who wrote it. I have to say, generally, it's an excellent project that I understand is mixed use, and there was some addressing of the mixed use nature. With the downtown business district that this site is in, having mixed use was and I think should be always encouraged. For this downtown business, zoning used to be the same as what we had in the village, but it really didn't work for the village. We also have another small downtown business district over at West Corner, and that West Corner is really north. I guess it has to do with somebody whose name was West. But I think as a mixed use project, the concept is excellent. I think the parking seems like it's safe and convenient. So from a site plan review perspective, I think it covers all the criteria. What's been submitted, in my estimation, and we can discuss it some more, covers the requirements in the zoning bylaw.
Thank you. I don't have any comments to add. I'm satisfied that everything we've asked for in the bylaw has been complied with. But before I got to the board, I did want to ask Lauren, do you have, we're done with peer review, I assume, but you have any specific comments or anything that you think is still outstanding for peer review?
No, I don't think there's anything outstanding. I did speak with the DPW director, who is, can confirm what Brennan Sullivan told you this earlier, and was pleased with the sidewalk location. And I agree. I think it's a good project for the community. I am going to recommend that, keeping in mind that this is also a special permit. I just don't want to lose sight of that, because we've been talking about site plan review criteria. This is also a special permit. So just with that keeping in mind, with Amy not here, you may wish to continue this rather than close it and deliberate at the next hearing, so that she may have an opportunity to vote.
Lauren, it's a special permit for the planning board?
It's a land alteration special permit as well.
So we had requested to withdraw that application because we don't think it applies to the site.
So then you just need, the board could just vote to withdraw, to accept that withdrawal.
Well, it begs the question to explain that. But.
So the first criteria is that the lot is under 18,000 square feet. The lot is 16 and change. And also under the land alteration permit, it says you don't need it if it's subject to a building permit, a special permit, or a stormwater bylaw permit. And we will need all three of those in this case.
Well, the suggestion that we continue this hearing till next week to close, to our next meeting to deliberate and start working on conditions, we can deal with that at this time. I mean, personally, okay. I'm at a disadvantage, and I didn't travel with my copy of my bylaw. But
just so I understand, it's not a special permit under our regular zoning bylaw for downtown business. It's a special permit for land alteration.
Correct. The downtown business did not have a special permit component that I recall. That was something we added when we changed the village to the village district. But okay, next, Kevin, any thoughts? Comments?
From access to and from the parking on the east side of the building, I would prefer to see that on the Church Street side. I think this is going to be problematic for traffic making that 90-degree turn around the ball fields to continue over towards Situate, or to continue north up towards the center of Cohasset. The way the entrance and exit to the parking is described and shown on these plans, as it has been all along, across from the ball fields, I think it would be better served having that entrance and exit to the parking off of Church Street. I understand there may be some topographic constraints to that, but I don't think that's anything that could be overcome relatively easily. I offer that as a thought. I would defer or be willing to defer to a traffic study to answer that question, but I do think it has a potential for a problem with cars coming and going out of the lot, with crosswalk, with people going to and from the lot and to the ball fields or to the playground across from the lot in front of us here. So I would like to see a traffic study answer that question. I really do think that could be a problem. Not all the time, but at the certain times of the day when the business is going to be up and running and frequented by, I would think perhaps a large number of people in cars getting to and from the place, it could be a problem. And I wouldn't want to see that. There's just one way in and out of there, and that's taking a left or a right at that intersection. The second point I'd like to bring up is I haven't heard any clarification either at the previous discussion on this or at this one. And I'd just like to bring it up, the question as to what the residential use would be at this building as a part of this application, and whether there would be any provision for housing for a low-income housing, that type of thing. That's all I have.
Okay. Brendan, hold the thought. Let me get to the rest of the board first. Deirdre, anything?
Other than I think that a lot of the safety issues have been addressed, the lighting, the crosswalks. I understand what Kevin's saying about the entrance and egress. My only concern is Church Street is much more residential than Stone Street. And you may have some of the residents on the Church Street side concerned that that part of their neighborhood will be disrupted by increase in traffic, where on the ball field side, it's much more commercial in the sense that it's a pass-through to Situate. And I just would be concerned that some of the residents might be a little put off by having that egress there. I do understand the safety issues on that street, but we are putting the crosswalks in and there are stop signs, and I do sort of err on our town engineer's knowledge of that area and what he feels would be a safe site plan. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, Chris?
Just want to make sure we're not losing sight of the second issue in Attorney Henderson's letter. It's probably not appropriate to get into it here without Attorney Henderson here, but he raised the issue of whether or not the residential use was an issue for the ZBA alone. I'm not sure if we want to touch on that at all. Again, without Attorney Henderson here, that might not be appropriate.
Well, before I get to Brendan, Carolyn, again, I'm at the disadvantage of not having my bylaw with me, but the downtown business zoning, is the mixed use required, and who has jurisdiction over that aspect of it?
Carolyn, you're on mute.
She's thinking about her answer very carefully until
she's rehearsing.
No, I'm fighting with my mute button here. So, I'm sorry. So that was in the downtown business district.
Yeah,
is that what you want to know?
It's a little island of downtown business zoning, and I didn't think that downtown business required mixed use, and that was one of the reasons we changed the village the way we did a long time ago. But
it has been encouraged. In the past for West Corner, people have tried to do only residential, and we've been like, no, it's got to be right. At least mixed use and have a commercial component. But on the table of uses, under the third heading for dwellings with more than one family, including combination with stores, it says SP under DB.
Right. Okay. So if you
right,
you can
it does not say SPP.
No, it doesn't say SPP. It says SP,
correct.
Which would be a special
right.
permit with the ZBA. So I think what Attorney Henderson is saying is accurate, even though we could say we would encourage the ZBA to vote in favor of this as a special permit.
So, but it means that if you want to have residential, you need the zoning board special permit, but you're not mandated to have it as you would be under the village zoning at the moment. So, all right. Brendan, I'll give you the floor to respond to Chris's two comments. I mean, I go through there every day. And yes, it's a very busy intersection. It's a major way in and out of town. And I get it that there'll be an entrance there. But I don't know if my own personal view is if are we moving a traffic issue from one street to another and solving anything by it. The Stone Street's still going to be busy no matter what we do. So, and with that new crosswalk there, but I'll give you, Brendan, an opportunity to respond to that.
Yeah, so, and the reason why we only have one entrance is because we were thinking originally about maybe having two, but the grade change certainly was one aspect. Another aspect was we didn't want it to, turn into a cut through or anything like that. So the thought was to just have one, to hone in on just one entrance and exit. We don't expect a lot of traffic. I mean, there's only, less than 20 spaces there. So those were the reasons why that we just we went for the one entrance exit off of Doan Street. And as Deidre mentioned, is about having the increase in the traffic on Church Street. So for those reasons, because we were thinking of actually doing like an angled parking, doing it like one way or the other.
Well, that's what I was just going to suggest, maybe having the entrance off of Doan and the exit on Church. I don't think the risk of a pass-through knowing that neighborhood, I don't think that's a real risk that anybody's going to use it as a shortcut to where.
Well, Tom, can I just add,
sure.
To Deirdre's point and to this whole discussion, we're not talking about a large area. We're talking about streets on all sides of a neighborhood run that go east of where this lot is. So if there's a traffic issue because someone can't turn left to go to Situate onto Doan Street off of Beechwood, they may be very well inclined to drive straight and then turn the next left on the Church Street and avoid the whole issue with a baseball team crossing a crosswalk, cars waiting to get out of a parking lot the way it's positioned now on the north side of this area. Church Street is going to become a part of this solution or this issue, regardless of where things are located. And I think everyone needs to look at this holistically, because if there's a problem on Doan Street, there's going to be a potential problem right away on Church Street. If there's a problem on Church Street, there's going to be a problem on Doan Street. So that's where I think a traffic study may need to come into play here to answer these questions and realize we don't want to just move a problem from one street to another if there's an issue with pedestrian use, vehicles turning in and out, the combination of all of those. I know for a fact how busy JJ's gets over on Route 3A. Everyone does. We've seen it. That has less parking spots than what's proposed here.
Well, again, as a regular, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to leave it to the board as to what we're going to continue this. So we have to make a decision of whether we're going to require further study on this. But I can tell you my own practice, there's no way I'm going to go around Church Street and go and avoid Doan Street. I can't see a delay being that substantial that I would do that. Because it's going to considerably slow me down to do it that way. But again, I'll leave it open to the board if anybody thinks we should study this further. I'm not sure that the use is going to be that intense of this site that's going to require that. But anybody else on the board have thoughts about what Kevin's suggesting?
It's going to be busy for sure during baseball games, summer days, that kind of thing. But I also wonder what's the difference in elevation between Doan Street and Church Street? Because Kevin, if I'm understanding you correctly, the request is for the parking lot to open on both sides. So it would be accessible to both streets, or am I misinterpreting that, Kevin?
I would think a simple single entrance and egress from the parking area would be sufficient. And I would prefer, and I think we'd be better served both as a town and both the applicant would be better served with that being on the Church Street side. And it would be on the Church Street side at the lowest elevation point, which is closest to the building, like where it's shown on the drawing now, but it's shown on the drawing now on the Doan Street side. I would prefer to see that.
Just one thought related to that, where a retail business thrives by having clear entrance and exits and visibility from passing motorists that would want to go to the store for the first time and then or for the second and third time. That the speed and convenience of getting in and out and being able to see how that access works is a benefit to the success of the retailer. You know, I guess if it was possible to have a throughway that I think like a one way in and one way out, that might be preferable to what is set up now and what Kevin is suggesting. But you know, I think what's on the table is a reasonable solution based on what I would expect for the amount of traffic, not being a lot. And if people can see that the parking lot is full, they might just pull into the ball field parking lot and walk across the street. You know, that's, I mean, I have little kids, and JJ's parking lot being right on 3A is a little scary because sometimes little kids run and they don't listen, you know. But this isn't the kind of the nature of 3A's, JJ's, which is a different, I think, for little kids and bigger kids, getting around safely. I think it's a slow moving area. I don't see people speeding or blowing through the stop sign whenever I'm over here. But let's talk about it some more. There's got to be more pros and cons.
Yeah, I guess what I would like to do now, if we're going to continue this, is to poll the board. I mean, doing a traffic study involves experts and expense. I mean, again, my vote would be not to require that, but to ask the applicant to consider the one-way in, one-way out solution.
Show us an alternative, perhaps.
Yeah, but let me poll the board. Let's just say a formal traffic study, yay or nay. I would be
Tom, I'm going to add that I do think, like Clark suggested, a one-way in, one-way out would contribute to more efficient traffic flow in and out of that parking lot if the applicant chose to do that over keeping a single entrance, one way, one out, single entrance off of Doan Street as currently presented.
I agree, and I would suggest that they do that. I want to make a decision if we're sending them on a path of a formal traffic study and then peer review by the town of that traffic study. So again, give me a consensus here on that particular thought.
I agree if the applicant is willing to try and create another scenario for us with one way in, one way out on whichever street. I still think Doan Street's the entrance. I think the egress could be the Church Street, but I agree. I don't think a traffic study would be necessary, but just an alternative look at what's there.
So if I may, I did pull out the plan if everybody can see it.
Yeah.
So the area we're talking about is this area over here. We can't come in right behind the building. You know, as we say, the access over here, we have space when you come in, and there's spaces on the right-hand side, a line as you come in. So the space to really have the exit on the Church Street side would be in this area here. So right. This is elevation 76, 77, and 78. We have elevation 74, which the grade is coming up. We have elevation 74 in the proposed parking area here. So we're still coming up 3 to 4 feet up to Church Street, because Church Street, as you know, comes up quite dramatically from Beechwood Street up, heading south. Where Doan Street's relatively flat. It's all flat. It's elevation 70 almost the whole way. So that's
you're saying you'd have to go uphill to get out.
Yes, and quite dramatically. And remember too, I mean, and it's not ideal to have the parking lot above the building. The first floor of the building is elevation 74. So we have to come down. That's why our, the sidewalk along the, the south side of the building is about elevation 73, 73 and a half. And then we're coming up from there to this corner at about a 6 or 7% grade, which is maximum you want on a parking area. So, and we're still 3-4 feet, and there's not a lot of room there to gain that grade change. That was one of the reasons why we abandoned the area of going up to Church Street, either with a throughway, either from Church Street to Doan Street or Doan Street to Church Street, just because we were thinking of doing angled parking, because we would probably be able to get more parking in here. But the idea of coming out on Doan Street grade wise just worked much better. And we don't think there's a lot of, quote unquote traffic, coming out of a 17 spot parking area.
The first Porsche 911 that tries to go over that lip onto Church Street would have its exhaust system ripped out, you're saying?
Are we concerned about the Porsche 911s of the world?
Well,
so I'm just going to add, there's plenty of parking lots that have been designed to work through grade changes like what was just described here. This is not an insurmountable grade. One of the benefits you get from a grade in a parking area is you get better flow through it with regard to drainage during storm events. So I don't think this is an insurmountable problem. I put it forth that I think the town would be better served looking at an alternative of 2 entrances, 1 in, 1 out, or moving this over to Church Street. That's where my point's coming from. I know you were just asking for comments on that, Tom.
Okay, all right. Well, let me do this to move our agenda along, since we have a couple of other issues to deal with tonight. Lauren, what would be the date and time we would continue this to?
I would recommend October 19th at 6:30.
Okay, so let me entertain a motion to continue this to October 19 at 6:30. And in the interim, applicant Brendan, please look at a potential redesign of at least a one-way past, one-way direction exit onto Church Street.
So moved on that motion.
All right. Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll make that motion. You moved, and who seconded?
You made the motion, but
all right, fine. Then I move. Clark seconded.
I formalized it.
All right. We'll leave it that I moved and Clark seconded.
That works too. Second.
All right. So Brendan, I mean, let's let you have the 2 weeks to think about it, make your case one way or the other. We can look at it from our perspective. I hear what you're saying. Again, I don't think anybody's here. We've reached a consensus. We don't need the formal traffic study, but let's consider some alternatives before we sign off on this, seeing that we need to continue this anyway. All right. With that motion, then I'll take a roll call vote. Clark
Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Kevin Hine, aye.
Kevin.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
Chris.
Flex, aye.
All right. Brendan, Susan, thank you.
Great.
You, Brendan.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
All right. All right. So now next is 80 North Main, correct?
No, next is 55.
Oh my God. Did I read it? I looked at it. I must have read it completely backwards, but all right.
That's all right. So I've just started to promote people. I'm going to still look in the audience. I know there's some more out there, but so far you have Jim Reardon from Weston and Sampson for the town's peer review team. You have Ted Delukian, John Danahy, and I believe Cassie Malatesto is here. I thought I promoted her. And then Paul Sogley is also in the audience here. Is there anyone else, John, that you'd like me to promote?
Oh.
No, I don't think so. I don't see anybody else. If we do, we'd probably have some experts, but I don't think we're going to need them tonight.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a continuation.
I think Mark Germano was joining us.
Oh, yes. Is Mark Germano listed?
Yes, he'll just have to accept the upgrade to panelist and then he'll be with us.
Thank you, Lauren.
All right, this is a continuation of our hearing on 55 South Main Street. John emailed me earlier today and suggested that your group would not be in a position tonight to comment on our peer review. So we will be continuing this, and Lauren, that would probably be to the 19th as well.
Correct.
Okay. And we discussed, presenting the redesign, but we kind of did that at the last meeting. So I don't know if we want to necessarily do that. I think what I'd like to use tonight for the benefit of the applicant is we have Jim Reardon here. He can present his peer review summary for the benefit of the public and for the board as a whole, anyone who hasn't read it yet, but and you can hear that. And then, just some brief board comments on the peer review and any outstanding issues, because I guess, John, correct me if I'm wrong, we talked about trying to get the board to highlight any issues they still see at this point with respect to the project. And then I mentioned one that I'll mention in a few minutes. But with that, then, if that's okay with everybody on the way to proceed, I'm going to turn the floor over to Jim Reardon from Weston and Sampson. Jim, if you could just summarize, the high points of your peer review.
Lauren, I was just going to ask if you could also promote Jeff Hassett.
All right. Well, we'll promote whoever you'd like. We're not going into a bunch of extensive discussion on it, but from everybody at this point. But so, Jim, why don't you go ahead? So, for the benefit of the public and the board members, summarize your peer review for us.
Chair Callahan, I will do just that.
Share your screen at your leisure.
Hopefully that's visible okay.
Yep.
All right, great. So this is, as you requested, a summary of our peer review for 55 South Main Street. We reviewed under 6 major topics that include general bylaw compliance, site plan layout, utility and stormwater management, traffic and circulation, environmental site review, and architecture. This is a list of the materials that we received and reviewed. I'm not going to go through the whole list of them. They are also in the peer review. They're listed out there as well, but included them here just for reference in case anybody needed to see them. Bylaw compliance. So we had a couple of issues under bylaw compliance that we wanted to bring out. One was related to zoning requirements to confirm the floor area is 1.3 or a ratio of 1.3 or less, or that if it is greater than 1.3 and less than 2.0, that you make that the applicant make a specific request to allow for the expansion to 2.0. The overlay district design guidelines. So confirm whether a complete list of abutters was certified by the town assessor that included the 2 sets of mailing labels has been submitted. We didn't have that in our review package. I'm assuming that was probably done. We just didn't get that material.
I can confirm that.
For the site plan layout, we had a few things. Generally speaking, things were in good shape here, but there were a few clarifications. So one of the issues was clarifying the dimension of proposed parking spaces and adjust them to meet local requirements if needed. We were specifically interested in, I believe there were 5 parallel parking spaces that were proposed. They look like they might be sized less than they were supposed to be. So if the applicant could just please check that, make sure that those are correct. The crosswalk striping should be provided across the parking way at the proposed curb ramp. And the proposed walkway should be adjusted for consistency. You can see the plan sections below, or if you look in the peer review in the plan sections, you'll be able to see what we're talking about. This is a somewhat different issue. So we're pointing out here consistency regarding the curb cut, or excuse me, the cross cuts or saw cuts in a couple of different areas. this is just kind of a technical matter to make sure that things are consistent and that the grades basically match up. So a couple other issues with site plan review. So we would recommend that the applicant consider providing wayfinding signage at South Main Street to the end of the pass-through walkway. And that additional photometric information is provided. It wasn't clear to us whether the pass-through walkway would be adequately lit in the evening. This diagram shows a couple of locations where we were uncertain about that. They're shown in red. So the red is something that we added in. And again, we just asked the applicant to provide clarification on that or additional information. Location and spacing of the four bike racks should be considered. We think this would be helpful to encourage the use of bicycles in this area. Consider the planting of 5 trees total, and also make sure that the trees that are proposed are native species and that they're on the town's list of appropriate street trees. That was something that the trees that were proposed were non-native, we believe, and so if the applicant could just check into that. And they do need to be on the town's list of street trees. So for utility and stormwater management, we had a couple of comments on those as well. The proposed manholes in the parking lot did not appear to have a rim, and the proposed water connections appeared to cross the existing sewer line. So the elevations for the inverts in the manholes on James Way are needed to make sure that these things aren't in conflict. And you may want to just consider moving the manholes east to avoid the crossings altogether. The stormwater design we felt was generally appropriate. However, we do make this one note, which is that the applicant references the LeBaron LK120. That should be updated since LeBaron is no longer in business. I know this is something that comes up pretty regularly on these reviews, and that it's because LeBaron is referenced in the design regulations for the town. But since that company's out of business, we'd recommend updating that. At very least, say LeBaron or equivalent. Traffic and circulation. So justification needed for why the existing traffic was not counted and the ITE trip generation rates were used instead. Generally, we prefer to see actual counts if at all possible. Justifications needed for why seasonal adjustments were not applied to the existing traffic counts as required by Mass DOT. If there's a reason for that, if you can justify that, that would be helpful. Otherwise, that seasonal adjustment should be made as well. We need a clarification of the calculation of the traffic volumes, and that's detailed a little bit more in the peer review itself. Clarification whether the site was in operation when the traffic counts were done along South Main Street. Provide appropriate crash data and crash worksheets. Provide additional clarification on how tandem parking spaces will be utilized and allocated. That was not clear in the materials we received. And clarify how tandem spaces will be utilized and monitored. Confirm if the spaces will be allocated to the same unit and are for private use only. A few more traffic things. So clarify how the resident will gain access to the building from the garage. Clarify how the layout of the proposed sidewalk on James is to comply with the district design guidelines. We recommend that the easement along South Main Street be provided for the sidewalk. So that should be, of course, an easement to the town. Excuse me. Clarify how someone walking through James Way would utilize the ramp at the corner of South Main Street and James Way. The way it was set up, it wasn't clear how that would work. Clarify how the parking lot landscaping will meet district design requirements or provide an appropriate waiver request. Then include a sightline diagram that shows the intersection and stopping site distances at the proposed site driveway. Make sure those are appropriate. Moving on to environmental site review. Now, we understand that this is a site where there was some contamination in the past. It's, of course, a site where there was an old gas station. We also understand that there is fairly high groundwater in this area. So excavation that's being done, if soils are being proposed for being moved off the site, we do believe there were surplus soils here. That those are being monitored appropriately and tested appropriately as needed. Additionally, if there's going to be dewatering, and again, we would expect that there would be, given the elevation of water at this site, that there is a dewatering plan that accounts for how you'll manage any contaminated dewatering that occurs. So we need information on how the redevelopment will be managed with respect to contaminated soil, appropriate methodology for managing the contaminated and potentially contaminated soil, providing a method to address surplus soils, as I mentioned. If surplus soils require management under a RAM plan, then confirm that the placement of structures will not prevent implementation of future response actions. Address dewatering considerations, as I mentioned a moment ago. Confirm the use of the area is not harmful or potentially injurious to residents. And then confirm the evaluation of potential installation of a vapor barrier or subslab depressurization system, obviously for once the building is in place. From an architectural standpoint, I know there were a couple of concerns related or potential concerns related to the flat roof. We took a look at that. We did an evaluation of it. And from our perspective, that flat roof appears to be appropriate height, appropriately configured. The materials for the facade, we found those to be appropriate as well. Review of the plan for the ingress and egress. So we only found one egress from this location. And in a situation like that, you need to have a sprinkler system. So we would recommend that the applicant take a look at that again, see if there was a way to add an additional egress. And if not, then there should be confirmation that an automatic sprinkler system is being included. Confirm whether provisions have been made to comply with ADA requirements for Group 1 units. So you'll see in the peer review memo that there's a discussion of Group 1 and Group 2 units, and it appears that this particular application would include the Group 1 units. So ADA accommodations need to be made for that. And then we would recommend that electric vehicle charging stations be provided at the site as well. That's something from the design guidelines. And that concludes our peer review or our summary of the peer review. Happy to take questions or offer discussion if needed.
All right. Well, again, we've discussed that the applicant's not in a position to respond to this in detail, and I'd rather them not even try. Cassie, I realize your whole team is here, but I'd rather you not try to just deal with things off the cuff. But again, per my discussion with John Danahy this morning, if the board has any thoughts on particular outstanding issues that you'd like to have addressed as a result of this peer review, now would be the time to bring those up. And I have two issues that, well, not one brought up by the peer review and one not. One is I'm still concerned about the height of the building, and Jim, with all due respect, discussion of slope roofs and flat roofs at the same time. The measurement to the middle of a slope is for what I consider a peaked roof, pointed peaked roof, not for a flat roof. And the architectural feature that's between these pointed dormers is, to me, just an architectural feature. This is a flat roof, and to me, it has to be 35 feet to that point. But again, I'm not looking for back and forth on this. That's my concern about the issue. And my other concern about this project still going forward is a decision to be made between rentals and condominiums and what we're going to do with about affordable housing. And again, I'm on record. I am not in favor of a payment in lieu option to deal with affordable housing. All right, so
Lauren has invited us to join the next Affordable Steering Committee meeting on October 11th, so we will be planning on joining that.
That's fine. I'm just, tonight is just the night for us to raise our issues so you can be prepared to discuss them at the next meeting. So that's mine. Kevin, you're next up. Any thoughts, concerns that you want to pass along that you'd like to see addressed?
I would just, if Weston and Sampson could expand upon the ADA compliant or requirements for Group 1 units. What are Group 1 units? Can you further expand on that?
Certainly. So I will show you where that discussion is in the peer review memo.
Page 16.
Thanks.
Or 15.
There we go.
Actually,
Group 1 units. 16. So that's on page 15 and 16. Again, thank you, Clark. I think that was Clark. There's a listing or discussion of Group 1 versus Group 2 units. You can see the Group 2 here and the Group 1 up top. Group 1, often labeled adaptable units. Group 1 units have features that can be modified without structural change to meet the specific functional needs of an occupant with a disability. For example, kitchen cabinets can be raised and lowered, and the bathroom walls have reinforcement to allow later addition of grab bars. These units are substantially similar to the requirements of the Federal Fair Housing Act. And there's discussion of the Federal Fair Housing Act below.
Okay. This is helpful. And can I just expand my question to, does this be, as a part of these requirements for accessibility, does that require that there be a elevator or elevator service to these units, which I understand from previous presentations would be on the second floor or higher from the ground floor entrance? Or are there a certain number of required units that need to be in place for an elevator to be required in order for something to be ADA required?
Yeah, so there's that's addressed actually in the paragraph that follows. And I'll just read that real quick. So all new construction of apartments and condominiums are required to provide Group 1 units on ground floors. In buildings with elevators, all units are required to meet Group 1 standards or be adaptable. Group 1 units are not required in alterations, reconstruction, and reuse. So essentially anytime where there is where there are units, this would be my understanding of it. And if you folks would like, I can get more clarification from our architect who did the review. But my understanding would be that anytime there are units that aren't on the ground floor, that there would need to be elevators.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Just so that we understand, there are elevators in this building.
Yeah, and I would like to add all the units will be Group 1 and there is elevator access on every floor. But I understand the question. And also the building will be sprinklered. It will be required to be sprinklered because it's a multifamily building.
Right.
Okay. Is that it, Kevin?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre.
I think I'm good until we give the applicants a chance to review the peer review. I appreciate the very extensive and well thought out peer review. It's very helpful to us as a board. I just do echo our chairman's concerns about the affordable housing piece. I will be a bit of a stickler. I would like to see what the options are going to be. And I am not really open to payoff to settle that situation.
I just asked the board to be objectionable right now, okay, open-minded. I know you're saying you're not going to be, but we've yet to have an opportunity to present on that topic. And as Cassie Malatesta said, we are going to be going before the Affordable Housing Committee to address this issue. So again, I just ask that you be open-minded at this point.
I appreciate that, and open-minded I will be. I just want the applicant to understand that that's a very major concern for me in this town.
And I just want to make it sure we are going to do something. Okay, this is not saying we're not doing anything. Okay, so let's just make sure.
John, and I appreciate that, but it's such a critical component of projects like this, and in my mind, it raises a question of why it hasn't been addressed at this point of the process. But we'll just leave it at that. I know you're going to come up with a solution, but understand it's an issue the board takes very seriously. So. All right. Anything else, Deirdre?
Tom, we take it very seriously as well. Just
Cassie, we're not going back and forth on it. We're just here to raise the board's concerns for your benefit. That's what we were asked to flag issues, and we're flagging issues.
No, I have no other issues, Tom. Thank you, and I thank the applicant.
Chris?
My echo was on the roof height. I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, and I'll just pass along that Amy Glassmeyer could not be here. When she announced that about 20 minutes before the meeting, I said, "Do you have any thoughts on anything?" And her thought about this was that the roof is too pointed, but she'll be here at the next meeting and she can address those more directly. But obviously, the calculation of height and the look and feel, I mean, again, we said at the last meeting that the look and feel of this was much better in complying with the overall design of the village. So I don't know that we have major concerns about the design, but the height of the building is still an issue that needs to be addressed. Lauren or Carolyn, are there any other particular issues that either of you have that you want to bring to the applicant's attention to address?
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Hey, I didn't get to make any quick comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. Clark, you're right. I'm sorry, Clark.
No problem. Yeah, usually you make me go first because of alphabetical order. But that's
sometimes
that's
I said I'm going to jump around at times.
You backwards and forwards, forwards and backwards is fine. I will say that the redesign, I think, was an excellent response to the strong thoughts about what was put together initially. I think that the team has done a good job. Even putting in the brackets at the parking
office
cutoff. I think in general this project has moved quite along. I think Jim and the Weston and Sampson team have made some very good, important analysis and review requests. So I'd say concentrate for the applicant team to concentrate on that carefully. I didn't see anything about the HVAC units. Generally, sometimes if you screen them or you try to hide them, the screening and the hiding makes the whole problem worse. I think one of the location on the roof is the critical part where they can't be seen, especially from the front or from adjacent residential neighbors. But in addition, the sound data, the HVAC units that are quieter are also, interestingly enough, a little bit more expensive. So I guess I would say the sound data should be provided to Weston and Sampson for their follow-up review. And I think any relocation options that get them out of sight and also help with the sound vis-a-vis adjacent residential uses would be helpful. Jim also brought up the amelioration or design approach for the potential for environmental stuff. And while as an architect, that's not my thing usually, but I did work on a doctor's office building right on Cambridge Street for MGH. And the approach there was for a heavy vapor barrier, but also underground vent tubing that once the parts per million, because the doctor's office doesn't want to have petroleum fumes in their doctor's offices. But I think that the point is a serious one, although it's also a technical one that Jim brings up. So having either active venting or active then passive venting, and a vapor barrier that's actually designed for whatever that material is. Regular standard 6 mil vapor barriers that you see in residential home construction wouldn't do the job of keeping the molecules out of the occupied spaces in the building. But there are reasonable cost vapor barriers that are available to put under the slab, whether they're 15 or 20 mil, that would do the job. And again, I would ask Jim and his team to follow up on that with the applicant. Those are my comments.
Okay, great. Thanks, Clark. Jim, you can end your screen share if you could. I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Carolyn, is there anything you'd like to add, or any concerns from your point of view?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Are there any members of the public out there? I was remiss about Beechwood Street asking. I didn't see anybody from the public, but any members of the public have any issues they'd like to bring up now that they think the applicant needs to address? Now would be a good time to speak. I don't see any Q&As, but I'll give it a couple of minutes. Lauren, on the time frame, if we continue this to the 19th, could you give us what the time frame you would need for them to respond to the peer reviews so that then Jim could look at it again and we have everything in front of us to make some progress on the 19th?
So typically, if the board is looking to stick with their policy of receiving all material 1 week in advance, you'll need Weston and Sampson's peer review by the 12th, which would mean a week from today they would need their material so that they would have a week to work on it.
John and Cassie, can you work within that time frame?
So you'll need it by October 5th. Is that what you're saying, Lauren?
Yes.
Yes, we can work within that time frame.
Just to be clear, it's a response on the questions that were in the peer review, not necessarily revised drawings reflecting all the changes.
Well, you'll go through the peer review point by point. You'll take into account the comments of the board members that you've heard tonight. And if you think it's appropriate to submit new materials, those would be in by the 12th. The response to the peer review by the 5th. Peer review will get back to us again by the 12th. You can submit additional materials if you need to by the 12th, and then hopefully on the 19th, we're in a position where we have everything we need before us and we can move towards a resolution of this application.
So,
yes, Lauren, hold on. Lauren, hold on. Go ahead, Lauren.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to note that in that timeline you just laid out, if the applicant were to submit new information 1 week in advance, then you wouldn't have peer review comments on that new material for that hearing. So I just wanted to make that known for you.
All right.
Again, we will have all material and rebuttal to the peer review by next Wednesday.
Okay, no, that's good. Again, yes, saying that without knowing what you may say or not say with your rebuttal. So, all right, no, so hopefully the 19th we'll be able to make a lot of progress towards bringing this to a conclusion. So
the only point is, Mr. Chair, I just want to go back over the height. That has now become a major issue. I know you've raised it before. So I just wanted to get it clear as to your interpretation of what you're saying, that you're saying, even though peer review said it's a flat roof and it meets the requirements, you're saying that the measurements are from the peak?
Well, I saw the peer review letter measuring both to a midpoint of a slope of the roof, which to me is a design component and not the roof structure. But the roof actually is a flat roof. And to me, the common sense as a non-architect and non-engineer is that the 35 feet is measured to the top of the peak, to the flat roof. If you had a peaked roof, yes, we allow, our bylaw as it's currently defined allows you to measure to the mid-slope, but you don't do both. You either have a peaked roof or a flat roof. I don't see logically how you have both. So if I'm disagreeing with Jim Reardon, then so be it. But
the definition of a flat roof, there is none in your bylaws. And certainly,
well, again, this is
well, we pretty much know what a flat roof is. We can when we see it. But Tom,
this is law stuff about plain and ordinary meaning. We all know what a flat roof is, and we all know what a peak roof is, and we don't have to define every term in the bylaw. But Tom, you can't have measurements of both. You can't have measurements of both.
Just a point of discussion, Tom. I do have the height definition opened up in our zoning bylaw, and Jim's comment about complying sort of raised my eyebrows a little bit. Yep. And what's really interesting in the definition is when you read it 3 times. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, we have a hybrid here that it's both a flat roof and a peaked roof. And I think that Jim's point of clarification is valid. That doesn't mean we have to agree if for some reason the board thinks that it's a particularly egregious interpretation and somewhere near the edge, and council may have some advice for everyone at this point, our council, that is. But what I see and what I read, and when I read it 3 times and really think about it, it doesn't give us the airtight as a flat roof that I think we all want for our future zoning bylaws that we're working on. Okay.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I understand it's a confusing message, which is why we're going to proceed to change it at some point in the near future. But
that's what I mentioned.
For dealing with it today, common sense tells me if the flat portion of the roof is 39 feet and 1 inch,
it's
4 feet 1 inch too high.
It's a combination here. It's a hybrid. Unfortunately or unfortunately, and I think the application of common sense, one's common sense, is what we do on the planning board to some extent. But I'm not sure if you really read it a couple of times, whether you come up with the same conclusion. So I'm just going to leave that one open.
No, I know, and I will of course do so. But again, it's still a concern to me, and we're talking about what I calculated as 4 feet 1 inch of perhaps being over, and I would like to think it can be dealt with, one way or the other. With some, we engaged in a great deal of creativity to get from the first design to this, so I think we can get through this issue. But the idea tonight was to flag issues. And
Tom, I actually hope so, because this is a significant issue that's been raised now. We've designed a large building. We've tried to really incorporate the design guidelines. We're looking at the affordable component. We're looking at all these things that, frankly, the town is looking to get rid of this blighted area. I mean, we got a flat roof garage that's from the 60s and 50s. And this is a linkage between the southern portion, the Red Lion Inn, going forward. And, now you're saying it's a flat roof. That's a major issue. I just want to raise it because I'm just telling you, a lot has gone into this to really try to stick to those design guidelines. My clients literally took to heart all the comments from this board, as well as the Facebook comments from all the people the David Farrags, Marianne Murphy, Melissa Dunn, and I read every single one on Cohasset 143 that you requested that we put on so that we could do it.
Yes.
Now, we've got a design, frankly, a beautiful design. It's incorporated a lot of traditional looks around the town, whether we're looking at the Red Lion Inn, Atlantic Bagel, or we're looking straight up the street. And, I'll tell you, you can look at the Red Lion Inn, they got a flat roof. We can go down to obviously Tedeschi's next door, and we have what's it, Williams Sonoma? Not Williams Sonoma. The I think it's the bank. All of them. There are different buildings that have flat roofs as well as peaks. This has peaks, and I can tell you right now. I'm just saying for the board, please be open-minded about this, because if you've already made your decision on that, it's a major problem.
John, nobody's made a decision, but you know, I realize that part of this is dictated by the need to be over a certain height over the culvert. But I'm sorry, the culvert's there, but it's there, and yeah, it's also not my job to maximize the profit earned per square foot here.
But we're not trying to do that, Tom. We originally we had 20 units. I'm saying we have literally.
I also can't I can't ignore the bylaw, and I just can't bend the rules because it's a nice project. I agree that the design is great compared to what was first proposed. I'm excited about this, but because, you know, I was part of the redesign of the village bylaw, and this is what we anticipated. This is exactly what we anticipated, but it just can't bend the rules.
I'm not asking to.
Right now, I'm thinking I'm having to bend a rule, or at least make you go get a variance for it. That's all my thinking is, but I'm one vote. Everybody's heard my position, and you know, I'm one vote in the end of the day.
Tom, just reread that height definition.
I intend to reread it probably 10 times between now and the next 2 weeks.
10 should be about the right number. Good.
I'll make it my daily thing before, you know, I do that sometimes. If I can't sleep, I pick up my copy of the bylaw and I read it. But
that's good to know.
You didn't bring it home tonight, though, Tom. You didn't
bring it right to sleep.
Yeah, keep reading, Tom.
I'd like to add one more thing to this discussion.
John, I'm not trying to be a real hard, I won't say that. I'm not trying to be too hard about this, but
I appreciate
I'm a real stickler about what our authority is to bend rules and not bend rules. And I wish we had more flexibility in some cases, but you know as well as I do that sometimes we don't. So
I understand.
Anyway, Kevin, I'll let you have a last word here. Oh, we'll need a motion, but.
I just want to add that with response to the applicants, addressing the environmental issues raised by our site reviewer, our peer reviewer. I think they would be best served to retain, if they have not already, and include in their responses professional opinions of a licensed site professional. Those are people that are designated by the Massachusetts DEP to address sites exactly like this with contaminant issues and address the future potential risks posed by them to future development of them.
Mr. Hain, we do actually. He's here this evening. We have a LSP with us.
It's fine. Thank you.
They've been compliant with DEP. That's why I brought him, because I want to make sure people understand that this is not willy-nilly. We've been compliant. We're following the details and everything else.
We haven't introduced him, and I haven't heard anything from him.
That's all right. But it's when
going forward.
Yeah, Kevin, we weren't going through a whole list of professionals tonight. That'll be next time. So again, Jim's provided a very detailed review. So we're looking forward to your detailed response next week. I'll entertain a motion to continue this to the 19th at 6:30.
I entertain a motion to continue this to the 19th at 6:30.
October 19th, just to be clear. So,
sorry.
Right.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, roll call. Clark
Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Kevin Hine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
And Chris. Aye. All right, thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, John, and Cassie and your team. All right, appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Yep, thank you. All right, so now next up is 80 North Main Street. Okay. This is a continuation of a large home review. And Lauren, if you want to just bring us up, just get everybody on who needs to be on and bring us up to speed as to where we are and what we're going to need to address tonight.
Certainly. This large house review opened at the last hearing session in August. There was a lot of concerns from the neighborhood and also voiced by the planning board about the size of the structure, about potential buffering and, you know, sort of sightlines from the neighbors. They were encouraged to speak with their neighbors and sort of try to work things out and come back with maybe some modifications. They have reported back. We've heard from neighbors. There is public comment distributed from a couple of neighbors particularly the Peisch family and as well as the Vanderwiles. And then tonight we have Jeff DeLisi, the attorney representing the applicant and homeowner, who is with us, Thomas Hens. So I'll turn it back to the chair.
All right. Well, if I understand right, Carolyn, I might put you on the spot because you might help frame our discussion here. That we have two legal issues that have been brought up by the applicants, and I think brought up by some of our members. One is conditioning with respect to the part of the bylaw that talks about scale of a building. And in the past, we did attempt through a large home decision to limit the square footage of a house because it was out of scale, on the argument that it was out of scale with the average size of houses around it. Our prior town council, the decision was issued. I don't recall we got a super definitive, and we were threatened with an appeal, and then we came to a resolution with that applicant. So that's an issue. That's number one. Can we do that? Because personally, for myself, I think 10,000 square feet is out of scale for this particular project. The second came from the applicants about whether our decision could incorporate an enforcement, essentially, of any agreements they come to with the applicant, or compelling that they come to some enforceable agreements, mostly regarding landscaping, which is another issue that we can address under one of the conditions under the large home review bylaw. So since that may frame our discussions based on what we've received from applicants, maybe you could address those two and what range of motion the board has here.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Why don't I take the last question first, because I think that's the easier one. As far as whether or not your decision can include, landscaping conditions for enforcement provisions, the large house site plan review is really not the place for that. This isn't a special permit decision where we are going to enforce those conditions. I look at a landscaping requirement, and while the planning board's decision here does help inform ultimately what happens on site, to a certain extent, that really is a private agreement between private property owners. And I certainly don't want to see the town, through folks like John Hallen, looking to enforce a landscape agreement. I don't think that's really our place to get into. Perhaps instead there can be some kind of a either a covenant or an easement that is agreed upon between the private parties. As to the other question in the scale of the house, and this came up obviously the last time, and I've reread this section over and over again, and just want to be clear that even though there is a threshold, a size threshold that triggers the large house plan review, it is just a triggering threshold for this process. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's any kind of a maximum or a minimum, a maximum that's imposed on the size of the house. Now, yes, you are allowed to look at the scale of the buildings and as they relate to others in the vicinity. And yes, your decision can include, all your only options here are either to approve it as is or to approve it with conditions. I will say this, that if you approve with a condition to limit the house to a certain size, I'd first want to back up and ask these questions. Mm-hmm. Does the house comply with the zoning requirements? I mean, putting aside the size of the house, does it meet the other zoning requirements in terms of setbacks or lot coverage, height, etc.? Because if the house as proposed does satisfy the zoning requirements, let's not lose sight of the fact that a single family house is a use allowed by right. So if the board were to go so far as to impose a condition here that limits the size of the house, I don't think we would be on strong legal grounds where the structure does not otherwise violate zoning. I do note, however, that the bylaw does require that any building is to conform with any conditions that the planning board comes up with. I think this just means that obviously if the applicant does not agree with the conditions, that yes, we will see an appeal.
Yeah, and in the past project where this came up, no one was suggesting that 3,500 square foot is a limit we would propose. I agree with you, it is just a trigger for review, but the attempt there was to dictate a square footage that was basically the average, or maybe on the high end, in conformity with the average height size of how homes in that area were. So, here we're not saying, a 10,000 square foot house needs to be 3,500 square feet, but it needs to be, the suggestion would be, it would need to be something that is more along the lines of the average of what's around it, which I think here was well in excess of 5,000 square feet, maybe more in the area of 7,000 square feet. But that was the thought, but I appreciate your comments on that. So Jeff, I'll give you the floor for a moment. We don't need to hear from the whole team here, but since I think we're narrowed down to these issues at this point, first, if you could address as much commitment as you can make about the neighbors and their concerns. And not only was landscaping concerned, there was another concern about why sort of tower feature had to be built into the design of this house as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Attorney Jeff DeLisi, Orenberger, DeLisi, and Harris, Tom Hentz is here with me tonight. The answer to your question on the tower effect, I think is found in the zoning bylaw. And I believe also, since Carolyn just alluded to it, I wanted to inform the board that the zoning bylaw not only contains dimensional requirements for setbacks, it also contains maximum lot coverage and maximum building coverage requirements. So if we're looking for requirements as to the size of a building, if it meets the setbacks, which this does, if it meets the height, which this will, and if it meets the lot coverage and building coverage requirements, that is theoretically the maximum of what is allowed in the zoning district. In other words, a massive box could be placed on this property, which goes up to all of the side yards and is limited to the maximum requirement of building coverage, which is 20%, and the maximum requirement of lot coverage, which is 30%. That's the zoning bylaw the town adopted. In this particular case, building coverage, the maximum requirement is 20%. And mindful of the fact that in this property is more than 3 times the size of the required lot size in the zone. So the lot size in the zone is 35,000 square feet. This property is in excess of 117,000 square feet. And that is itself larger than many of the lots in this neighborhood. But as far as the lot coverage and the building coverage requirements are, lot coverage is 30%, and we are proposing a 17.8% lot coverage. So we're almost a lot coverage that is half of the permissible maximum. And as far as the building coverage is concerned, the requirement is no more than 20% of the building can cover the lot. And in this particular case, we're proposing 7.8%.
All right, can I just cut you, Jeff? Yeah. I don't mean to cut you off, but you know, Carolyn made that point. We know, I think the board is appreciative of the fact that the large home review is not something we can use to stop something that is otherwise compliant with the bylaw. The issue before the point of this bylaw when it was first passed, not as a special permit, but as a site plan review, was to encourage discussion between neighbors and applicant to come to some accommodations. And again, so they have to be voluntary. We have concerns from the neighbors about the design, the size, and the landscape plan. Is there any accommodations that's going to be made, or is the answer going to be, we're doing everything in compliance with the bylaws, so be it?
So there is an accommodation, which is a massive accommodation with respect to this application. And that is that on the northerly side yard, the closest point of the existing building to the sideline is 8.2 feet when 20 feet are required. And what we are doing is removing that nonconformity and bringing the building into full compliance such that it is at least 20 feet off of that northerly side yard. Okay. That I believe in and of itself coming in is a concession. But to answer the question, since the last meeting, we have had meetings with neighbors on both sides with respect to landscaping in particular. We have had our landscape architect also discuss and have a meeting. What we've done is we've proposed a vegetative screening along the north side yard, which would include a hedgerow, fence. There would be jolly green giant trees. There would be juniper trees that are going to remain, and other vegetation. And we believe, in addition, that vegetation, which we're willing to commit to with our private property owner, we will work with them, is sufficient to protect those privacy interests. In addition to that, I think that Mr. Hentz had provided to you a letter wherein he outlined that the design of the home was created such that the windows would be facing the view of the water more than it would be, they would be facing the lawn area. And in this particular circumstance, the neighbor to the north also has a pool area and a pool house, and the pool house, if you would, creates a privacy buffer from this particular building, such that if they were sitting in the pool, in all likelihood, they'd probably only see a small part of the top portion of our house from the pool. And so our commitment to the north property owner, the Peiches, is that we will put in this vegetative buffer. As discussed, we recently sent them a plan, I believe on the 26th, which may have overlapped with their letter to you. But that landscape plan is something that we'll continue to tweak and work with them on. With respect to the Vanderwiles on the south side, there is already a good hearty 15 to 20 feet in width of a vegetative buffer screening that is already on the property, and it has not even matured. And so our proposal is to maintain that buffer and to allow that to continue to mature, because the alternative would be that if we were to plant additional buffer, in order for us to be able to access the rear of our property, given the grade changes, we would need to remove the existing vegetative buffer and plant something in its place, which would essentially be less mature than what is there now and probably would not provide any much more of a benefit. So we're continuing to look on that side yard, and what our proposal is. We did discuss this with the Vanderwiles, I believe. I was not present, but it was reported to me, it was discussed that it probably makes sense for us to understand, like, to kind of plot the building out, and as the building is foundation is going in, and we can confirm and understand exactly how these grades are going to work, so that we can confirm access to the rear. That will allow us to reassess and continue. We will continue to work with the Vanderwiles on their requests. So that's what I can report right now.
All right. Let me, Carolyn. So we could incorporate under the large home review bylaw decision under the landscape considered. We could incorporate what Mr. DeLisi just said that the applicant is committed to do. We can't include any kind of enforcement mechanism. We can't include any requirement that they come into a binding agreement with the abutter.
Correct.
Okay. All right. All right.
And Mr. Chair, we could send. There was a prior iteration of that landscape plan that was included in Mr. Hence's package to you, but it was on an 8.5 by 11 document. We've since updated that after discussions with the Peisches, and we could send that into Lauren so that she can reference that in her decision.
I would appreciate if you do that.
Yes.
We'll, unless I'm hearing something from the members of the board, I think we'll be bringing this to a head, and we'll just then have to reduce it to a written decision. So anyway, let me go now to just some comments from the boards, and then I do want to hear from the abutters as well. So I will start with Deirdre on our rotation. Anything that you want to offer at this time?
I have no
understanding what you've heard from council about the limits.
What I've heard from everybody, I have no comments.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Just want to thank you for working with the neighbors. Hope we get to a good conclusion there.
Clark?
Yeah, last meeting, one of our members asked for a 3D rendering, and if other board members haven't seen it yet, maybe the applicant could pull it up.
Yeah, we provided that. More than happy to pull it up.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't you take us through it quickly, Jeff, if you could?
Well, it's
self-evident.
I mean, these renderings are difficult to formulate, right? Because they're theoretical in nature, but based upon, as best we can, the plan. So
and then for orientation purposes, when the drawing that says back of the little harbor aerial, to the left side of that drawing, is that the Vanderwile boundary, and then the other side is the Peisches, or do I have those reversed?
You're correct. You're looking from the east vantage point. So, and the as I'm looking at this, for instance, the vegetation that's shown on here is certainly not representative of what is there or what will be there.
It's generic, kind of
generic, yeah.
Shapes and forms, but it gives a sense for the three-dimensionalness of the house, and that the massing is scaled back on the southern side.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything, Clark? Anything?
Yeah.
Anyway, let me just quickly interject from the Q&A from Mrs. Peisch. Is there a view from the Peisch side in that 3D rendering? Like,
there was just those two views that were submitted to us.
Those are the only two views. Okay. All right. Clark, anything else?
Yeah. I mean, typically I think that the RGFA calculation doesn't have a requirement for basement, even if it's walkout. So I think the applicant, gave us 2,000 square feet that we wouldn't have gotten from perhaps some of the other, having a RGFA of 8,000 square feet instead of 10,000 square feet. Not that really makes any difference, because as council points out, for the applicant as well as our own, it conforms to zoning. Really what we're doing is we're ventilating the thing and seeing if there's some mitigation that could be done regarding abutters. I think it is going to be a big project for this particular neighborhood in a visible site for the town, as well as it does have some good visibility from across the not the entirety of Little Harbor, but to a great extent of Little Harbor, and hopefully the house will be seen as a positive actor in those houses that step down into Little Harbor. I personally don't have a problem with the architecture, what's been proposed. It seems like the applicant has made a good faith effort to mitigate what they plan to do with their direct abutters, and I appreciate that. I would recommend that we make a statement about continuing during the construction process and finishing things up, that they continue to work with their abutters. There may be a communication strategy. I know sometimes this falls into the hands of a project manager instead of the owner, where the owner hires a project manager and that person communicates what the schedule is, when you know the dynamiting is going to be done. Not that there's ledge here and there will be dynamiting, but when the excavation is, generally when the framing is, when the roof and windows are going to be done, and then when they'll be done and the landscaping is done, just so everybody knows if the schedule changes and they're hoping to have landscaping at some particular time, that there's a mechanism for them to kind of communicate that. Not that they can't work from 7 to 7 Monday through Monday, just as is indicated in the general bylaw for construction. But if there's an open communication channel, if there's some special event in one of the abutters' lives, and that they might make a request for not having construction work on a particular Saturday afternoon next July, that they could make that request in with an open channel communication, and a project manager perhaps that does that, or maybe it would be called an ombudsman. I don't know what, but again, I think the architecture, the design, I think is good. Certainly it will be visible from North Main Street, where you really can't see anything now. I mean, you can see the garage sort of over to the side. And anything that might be annoying to the neighbors. I don't think we've talked about HVAC units, but we brought it up at the last one. If there are outdoor HVAC units that have any sound, that they that the more expensive units that don't have any sound or minimal sound impacts be used instead. It's an outline of sort of comments or potential if we have approval with conditions instead of just approval. Mm-hmm. Does anyone have any questions about what I've suggested?
Oh, let me get through everybody's thoughts on the board first. Kevin, you're last up.
Yeah, I appreciate the efforts of the applicant and to fostering a line of communication with the neighbors to make this fit and work for the neighborhood. One thing I was just curious about was with regard to the new plantings. Was there a percentage of those that have been identified as native plantings? It may have been mentioned at the previous call. I just was curious as to what that was. And I think, you know, having something that fits in with the neighborhood, fits in with the town, fits in with the South Shore environment, fits in with the marine environment, given that this is a shoreline lot. Native plantings are important in that regard. So that's why I asked that question, if that was something that had been identified or you could readily identify now.
Yeah, so Kara Lamb is on the phone. Kara's or on the call here. Kara's our landscape architect, and I believe I saw her head nodding, such that she may be able to answer your question.
Yes, so Kevin, because this is a coastal property, most of the plants chosen for this lot are native so that they would withstand the coastal conditions. It's a very harsh environment. And so I would not be proposing any trees that would be planted and then they would immediately die. So it is a very harsh, with nor'easters, the saline wind, the soil itself has salt in it. So everything that's been chosen has been selected to withstand that. As in terms of native vegetations, we went through the Cohasset Conservation Commission. Everything within the buffer zones are native. And then even outside of the buffer zones, I've taken a lot of consideration into what will survive. I don't have the percentages though.
Okay, well, I'm glad that the effort and provision has been made for that, given the environment you're in, and I think that's an important consideration, and appreciate the attention to that detail. Thank you. I don't have any other comments.
Aren't we, Kara, taking out quite a bit of non-native plantings that are there presently?
There's currently a lot of non-natives, yes. So we are replacing it with native plants. We are, for example, rehabilitating the slope.
I think we can condition that. I think that's fair game for us to condition within this limited scope of this bylaw to insist on native plantings. But again, Concom is more expertise in this, and we can certainly incorporate what they've decided. I'm not ignoring what Clark threw out there, but let me go with, that's ultimately going to come to our decision tonight and what we're going to do. Let me throw this out to the public. I noticed there's another question Mrs. Peisch was asking is why there was no 3D view from her side of the property, but Mrs. Peisch, if you'd like to be promoted, we can hear from you now. I don't see Mr. Vanderweil here. Not sure there's anybody representing Mr. Vanderweil, but Ms. Peisch, if you'd like to be promoted, we can do that. If you have any comments to make, now would be the time to make them. I see you. Okay. You're muted, and we can't see your no video as well. So.
Tom, there is an exterior elevation that's that shows what's proposed along that property line.
Yeah, all right. There may be. I don't have access to, but I just want to see if there's some comments you'd like to make. To please do so. Mrs. Peisch, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go right ahead.
Yes. So our concern is that the proposed building site is we're going to have along our property line a 2-story and further down a 3-story elevation, and the proposed pergola has a huge west-facing window that's going to overlook our property, and so
they would consider north.
Well, yeah, my husband's just correcting me. What you guys are proposing north, but that's not really north. Anyways, it's going to overlook our patio, deck, and upper garden area, and at night the lights will shine in. And in the wintertime, the lights will, cast over our yard. It's just a very large structure that's being proposed, and we're concerned of our privacy. And
well, again, you've heard the comments from our council and ourselves about the limits of this bylaw, and right. The height is compliant right. with the bylaw. And there is not a lot that this particular bylaw can do about that. Now, Jeff, I did hear you say about moving windows around, and I don't know if you or Mr. Hensey or Susan wants to address that, but if you'd like to comment on the Peisch's concerns, please do.
Yeah, so I alluded to a correspondence that Mr. Hens had put together, which attempted to address that issue, and I could read from it for the public with respect to that. So the design also purposefully positions the windows and views over their pool house or out to the water, not towards their back patio area. This room is a secondary second floor bedroom office that will see primarily daytime use and will not create any privacy nor light pollution concerns. So that was the response on that. And by the way, I had neglected to mention previously that we have completed our conservation process and received an order of conditions.
Okay. All right. All right. Mr. and Mrs. Peiss, anything else that you'd like to bring to the board's attention?
Well, we feel that it's an oversized window. I think it's 3 times larger than a person, that will, overshadow our yard. I think it's at least 37 feet tall, if not taller. And even with planting, it will take a long time. And we have a little raised deck here that we use. I can see their current chimney, and that kind of marks the bottom floor, the bottom of their proposed tower. So of course that thing is going to be looming all over, and it's not our pool area. It's our upper area that we use a lot for entertaining and outdoor time. And we feel that it's an invasion of privacy. We've asked Mr.
Unfortunately, that's way outside the scope of the bylaw.
Right. No, we understand.
Other parts of the bylaw, but particularly in general, but particularly this bylaw, unfortunately. I mean, again, the whole point of large home review is to deal with the size of houses and
right.
the trend toward going bigger and bigger. And, that's something that we are going to need to address perhaps in a different way than we have for the last 17 years. But I appreciate your comments. So for the board, Lauren, you've been taking notes, I trust and hope. And are we under any time constraint with issuing a decision if we close this hearing? What is the time constraint?
I'm just going to confirm that for you if you'll just give me a moment.
I believe it's 14 days from closure for a decision.
Well, we're not meeting between now and 14 days, so that's the problem. That's what I wanted to ask.
Well, we could certainly extend.
All right, if we could do that, I would move to close the hearing tonight. But if the applicant would give us until our meeting of October 19th to finalize the written decision, that'll give us time to incorporate. And I think that decision, from what we're hearing from council and elsewise, it may incorporate what Concom is required about plantings, and it would incorporate landscaping conditions about what you've outlined as your landscape plan, but I'm not sure we can legally go beyond that, as much as I would personally like to limit the size of this house, but I understand what I can do and what I can't do. So if you would agree that we can get this written decision to you on the 19th.
We would agree. Thank you.
So I'll make a motion for the board that we close this public hearing tonight with the plan to issue a decision by our meeting of October, a written decision on October 19th. Lauren will, with the notes and everything she's heard tonight, will distribute a draft decision before that meeting on the 19th for us.
Second that.
Clark is seconded. Roll call vote. Clark.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
Chris Flex, aye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Hentz and Susan, everybody from your team. Jeff, thank you. And thank you to the applicants for your participation in this process. Wish we could do other things, but we can't. So we'll move on to the rest of our business.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it as well.
Thank you, Jeff. All right. Yeah, let me quick find them. All right, so Lauren, do we have any minutes to deal with tonight? Or we're done with hearings tonight, correct?
Correct, you're done with hearings. I was just checking my email to see if you had minutes to approve.
I don't think we do.
I don't believe so.
All right. So a couple of other properties have come up in various emails and discussions that I just wanted to run by the board tonight. One was 81 King Street, which is, I believe, a permit associated, I believe, with the landfill site. Another was one of the members of the select board has brought up the issue of 520 North Main Street. This is a residential property. It abuts the golf course. It's across the street from the train entrance, and there's a proposal that's been made for a friendly 40B proposal there. And I believe, Lauren, it's, oh, I'm sorry, Lauren, you got your hand up. Sorry.
Just two quick corrections. The first site that you referenced, 81 King Street, actually is in reference to Situate Hill subdivision.
Oh.
And that's their sale was contingent on the whole permitting process, which they've now secured. They have the site plan approval. They're ready to move with permits, but however, they need to go back and close out the subdivision. The new owner has agreed to take that on. However, there's all this sort of like cleanup that needs to take place. So that's that property. It's not the landfill.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Carolyn, so you're doing all the legal stuff with the parties involved, and okay, so we'll leave that at that.
Yeah. And then the second property, you said 520, it's actually 502 North Main.
Jeez, I'm batting 1,000 tonight, but I'm in vacation mode. But so 502 is
close enough.
502 is proposed. How many units on the site?
Let me double check. I believe it was 20.
I think it was 20, wasn't it? Or,
I believe it was 20.
Yeah. So at this site, there is a house there now that's up close to North Main Street. It's the last property before, you know, if you're going toward Hingham, before you get to the golf course. It's across from the train entrance, and the current owner, there's a lot of land apparently behind this house, and the current owner is proposing a friendly 40B project where he works cooperatively with the town under what's called the local initiative program to get this approved. And friendly 40B, unfriendly 40B, this board will not be participating in the permitting of that. But it is a cooperative process with the select board. And I guess this is on the select board's agenda for next Tuesday again. And one of the select board members reached out to me and just was curious about our thoughts, if any, about this project or guidance. And especially in light of what the MBTA is going to require of us to do with zoning. This property would fall within the perimeter that would fall within this new MBTA zoning. I don't think it's as dense as the MBTA zoning would propose, but the question was, we are, I guess, in a position, Lauren, you can confirm this, where we are currently in 40B compliance with the number of units we have, and don't necessarily have to go forward with this project and be agreeable, but you know, we have a census in 2030, and we had a census in 2010. We were out of compliance. We came into compliance. We found ourselves out of compliance with the 2020 census, and we will, you know, if we continue to have other development in town, we have to continually be concerned about our 40B compliance of 10% of our units being affordable. So whether we need to entertain this at this exact moment, we will probably need to entertain it at some point in the future. So with that background and brief knowledge that I have, you know, this one particular member of the select board was asking if we had any thoughts, guidance that might be useful to the select board in their deliberations about what to do about this project. So, you know, if anybody, I'll just throw it out there if anybody has any thoughts about it. Personally, I'll say that I'm okay with it. We, you know, just again, because we're at our 10% threshold at the moment doesn't mean we'll be that way when we get to the next census. So I have no issue with it, and it at least would show the state some good faith that we're trying to do something about affordable housing in this community. So Anybody on the board, Lauren, including you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the aesthetics are should be seen as preliminary. You know, a townhouse version with parking on site. I think screening and things that, you know, from the street, so it's not so obvious. It's a multifamily. I mean, this is not a good looking project. I think the golf course wouldn't like it. Not that I'm a golfer, but it's just that
well, let's
it's different. It's sort of it's a transitional residential area to the golf course and the train station areas. But zoning wise, I mean, well,
Clark, I don't want to get hung up in the design and everything, because that can all be brought up to the zoning board when they have to permit this thing. But I guess it's the broader question is the concept of, do we think this is a good idea to go forward with a multifamily, to go forward with affordable housing in light of all the commitments that the town, and do we as a planning board from that sole perspective have any objection or comment about it, about whether it's even the idea of the project, not the look of the project?
Well, I mean, I think the aesthetics is a factor, and I would say a pocket neighborhood compared to a mega building is a much better approach. That I think that's you know, the aesthetics matter. It is sort of a transitional area in between some big uses and a regular single family neighborhood. But what I see here, I gotta say, it's gotta be preliminary. It's not, I don't think we would want to see a pancake development like this, a big box with a flat roof in any neighborhood, frankly.
Okay.
But pocket neighborhood with broken upscale, you know, some townhouses, low rise, the mix, with appropriate screening and design, sure. But you know, like this, if this guy's from Quincy, they're doing like big stuff all over Quincy, and Quincy is saying, give it to us. We want it. And if you ever read the Patriot Ledger, I think you're probably the only one who does. That there's just a ton of big, dense stuff where the parking doesn't really work, and you know, it's shocking how much they're getting in, but that's the deal that they made as a community. Here, I think we can do something that's in between, and I don't want to take up all the air.
All right, Kevin, again, focus on the idea of a project like this rather than its particular aesthetics at this point in time. I think that's what the select board member is looking for.
Tom, I'm open to considering all options on the table, but I don't feel like I see any other options on the table. You're making reference to development over across the road there, over on the other side of the train station, that the MBTA would be at the lead at. I have zero information on that. And I do try to keep myself up to speed with regard to just general issues like that in Eastern Massachusetts, in our town, in our area. I've heard reference to that, and I know nothing on that. So you're asking me to make a question, or someone on the board is asking you to convey to the board and get some feedback on that. I would like to see this in the context of what we're talking about for that area, to be able to render a useful opinion on that.
That's a fair comment. Let me see what other board members say, and perhaps Lauren or I can give you the 5-minute MBTA summary, because it's still in motion. But you know, let's say the MBTA. I don't think the MBTA rules have been totally finalized yet, but it's anyway. Next, no, Carolyn's shaking her head. They're not finalized yet. They're ugly. I mean, they're ugly if applied as presently written to the town of Cohasset. But I will give you the 2-minute. They're not compelling us to build anything. They're compelling us to zone to allow certain things to be built within a perimeter around an MBTA station. This property would fall into that perimeter. We can't draw a perfect circle, you know, in Cohasset. It would be other properties on 3A would fall into the perimeter. How far down 3A, that remains to be seen. But the MBTA project would require a lot of units, the permission, the zoning to allow for these units, again, not constructing them, a lot of units, unrealistic for the town of this size as a percentage of what it would require of our current housing base. And it requires them at a density that's much greater than our zoning allows anywhere, and much denser than this project, for example. Again, with the threat of certain penalties that the town might suffer, and actually there's discussion going around that those penalties may not really be an impact to the town of Cohasset. They may be affecting grants and stuff we don't qualify for anyway. So there's a lot of debate about what we're ultimately going to do about that. But the proposal is another effort, in addition to 40B, for the state to get communities all over the state to do some more development of affordable housing. And they're using the context of a train station to try to encourage that. So that's the larger context. But you know, we as a town have talked about affordable housing. What we're going to do about that, it's going to be our zoning bylaw forum in November is going to touch upon that subject. And you know, this gentleman can come forward with a friendly 40B. He could come forward with a hostile 40B, and you know, we can't control what he would like to do. But so the idea is this a site that, do we object to a multi-unit development on this site, really, you know, given its proximity to the train station, or do we not? Anyway, next, Deirdre, have you got any thoughts about this?
I don't object to multifamily there, just aesthetically. I'd like to see something, you know, a little more attractive than what was just shown to us. Right. But I absolutely applaud if somebody is willing to come forward. Having worked with the state many years ago, for many, many years, I know what we could get shoved down our throat or be attempted to shove down our throats. And, you know, affordable housing of that size and scale would be much more accommodating to the town. You know, my concern is something from the state may render us where we're already headed, which is that our schools are busting at the seams. And if you put in, you know, a very large capacity that the state and the MBTA is going to wish we do, we may be in a much more difficult situation as a town going forward with our school system. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with that site. I actually think it's a pretty decent site if the structure, and, you know, I like Clark's comment about a little nestled neighborhood there. That would, you know, that would be attractive, you know, and then there's crosswalks and people can get to the train station. But I'm open to hearing more from, you know, the town as to what we're really looking at, as you said, the grants, et cetera, that may not even affect us. So threatening us may not be of any business of the town. We just have to figure out how to have more affordable housing in town.
All right, thank you. Chris, any thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think it's a good location for it. I'd much rather be thinking about how do we plan out 40B when we don't need it than when we're behind and when we're at risk of being out of compliance. I wonder if it's more than we need, but you know, maybe that's not the right way to be coming at this. So at a high level, I think it's a good idea in terms of how it looks and how dense it is. We probably shouldn't set the standard that it's going to look like the rest of the homes in Cohasset. And I'm not suggesting anybody on the board is, but I think to get affordable housing done, you're not going to have the 3,000 square foot houses on a half an acre of land that you have in the rest of the town. So I think some density and some architectural optimization for space is appropriate, but I do wonder if it needs to be as big as it's planned.
Yeah. Okay. Lauren, again, this was brought to me by one select board member. So you can take some notes if you. I would offer a memo to the board, the select board, like for what it's worth. And you can just say that one member reached out to us about our thoughts about this, and perhaps summarize what you've heard, that we don't overtly object to the development per se. We have some design and aesthetic concerns about it, and there should be more work done on that. As far as the compliance with 40B, I mean, I don't know. I believe how far we are in compliance right now is what I'm understanding.
We currently are in compliance, and until the 2020 census figures are all released in the manner that we need them to update the figures that are used to calculate the subsidized housing inventory, the figures will remain using the 2010 decennial census figures.
Okay. So we're not even waiting till the 2030 census. We could find out in a few months that we might be out of compliance.
Correct. We never were really updated in 2020 because of the lag in census, and we had anticipated that we would get numbers by the end of the year, but now it's looking like it's going to be longer off. So it's uncertain exactly when we will have a final figure of an update, but it is, I would say, within the next 2 years more likely, rather than looking at the 10 years down the road.
Right. Okay. Well, without objection from anybody else on the board, I'd also express that maybe this board takes the position of being proactive on our 40B compliance as much as possible, so we're not scrambling every 10 years at the last minute trying to get something into the pipeline. But I'll leave it to you if you'd like to put something together for them. As long as one of them reached out to us, I think we should give them the courtesy of a response.
Back a couple of years ago, we were like 30 units behind because of all the single family construction. But with the project at Stop and Shop and the other project at the bottom of Pleasant Street, being all rentals, we're at almost 40 units that would count towards the SHI.
Yeah.
So we may be actually, even if the census figures get resolved soon, we may actually be all right.
Yeah, we may be. We may
extra,
be.
But
right.
We might be all right.
And the select board is, I take it they're going to consider that, or whether they have to, participate in this friendly 40B process at all. But, I think the last two go-rounds in the census haven't been involved in this so long. We always seem to be in a delta that the mid-20s seems to be, we're short that many units, like 25, 23 units. And this just continually seems to, it's around the same number, 25 to 30 every 10 years that we seem to fall behind. But all right. The other thing that there was, one of the members of the Concom has circulated an email about 18 Lambert's Lane and mentioned our board and some a site or a permit we may have issued in the past on it. And Lauren, I don't know all the details if you want to summarize and whether we need to be involved and say something about it.
Didn't have an opportunity to speak with John Hallen about it, and I wasn't copied on the discussion, so I don't want to misspeak because there's a couple of properties at Lambert's Lane, and I'm not certainly clear which is the concern today.
Yeah, in a nutshell, I looked at the email at first. I know there's a concern that perhaps some conservation conditions that were stated at a meeting were not translated into the order of conditions by their then agent, and there are some compliance issues, I guess, with that, and concern was being raised. But I know our board was mentioned about some permit, and I think 18 Lambert's Lane was before my time, so I don't know what that was about. All right, we can put that off to the side. Does anyone else, including Carolyn and Lauren, have any business not anticipated 48 hours in advance, or other issues that we need to discuss tonight?
Just the announcement about the forums.
Oh, the forums, yes. So our first zoning bylaw forum, which will focus on the issues of potential changes in the harbor and the village, will be on Monday, October 17th. It will be held live at the big meeting room at the Senior Center. It will also be on Zoom and television simultaneously, so everybody in the public is encouraged to attend. So I hope members of this board will watch it and pay attention to it, and it's our first effort of getting some public feedback about possible changes or suggested things we should do with our zoning bylaw.
It'd be great if the planning board members could come to the forum in person, because I think there's going to be coffee and cookies.
Yes, and Lauren,
What time is it?
It's starting at 6:30, and that first one, is going to be they're going to deal with the harbor and village in two separate sessions with a break in between, but I don't think it's going to be overly long because I don't think the presentations from the board are going to be overly long. It kind of depends on how much feedback we get from the public, and we are retaining a third-party facilitator who will control the flow of Q&A. Yeah, Laura, you know, if just in case, be ready for both the zoning bylaw committee and the planning board if we happen to have a quorum present to make sure that's posted. The second forum will be November 7th, and that will be focused exclusively on the issue of housing, and the Affordable Housing Steering Committee is going to participate with the zoning bylaw committee. Woody Chittick from the zoning board has some thoughts about the ADU, the accessory dwelling bylaw that we have, and changes to that. But that is one where there'll be discussion of what our housing production plan that the Affordable Housing Committee manages. There will be discussion of what the MBTA is seeking to impose on us and other towns in the Commonwealth. And Lauren's been on top of that, and she'll be presenting mostly on that. And while the focus is mostly going to be on the development of, you know, whether or not we should develop and how we would do it, multifamily and affordable housing, it is on the topic of housing generally. And so, you know, perhaps we will get public comments and discussion about house sizes, large home review, and some other stuff. But really the focus is going to be multifamily affordable. And then our third forum is December, I don't have any of this in front of me. December 5th. And that is where we're going to be discussing any potential bylaw changes related to climate change, resiliency, green development, low impact development. We are reaching out to a member of the CONCOM who's an expert in his professional life on this. Clark Brewer will be a featured speaker on the green and low impact development aspects of this. And again, we're going to be, you know, trying to get the community ready for the fact that bylaw changes may be coming related to these issues. I've noted online that a number of the towns around us have dedicated committees or study groups on climate change and resiliency. So it's a bylaw feature a number of towns are looking at. And again, we'll get community feedback on that. So we have 3 planned for the remainder of this year. And then we will head to the spring and probably have a couple of more, both on some other specific topics, as well as what bylaw changes may be proposed for spring 2023. So that was that. Thank you for reminding me, Lauren.
Lauren, did you send out invites to those or details if we wanted to attend those remotely as opposed to in person or both?
Absolutely. We will send out information to all of you. And then I'll just ask if the members could let me know if you plan to attend in person. That way I can post them if we have a quorum, or just if you attend at all, just let me know.
Yep. We have Justin Schreer, our new young get-go communications director, is doing a lot of publicity about this. And Lauren and Cassandra must be applauded for their efforts. And I found out about it at a recent farmers market, and they were there with a table handing out flyers about this and asking people, are you interested in zoning? And my neighbor happened to be there and said, no, I don't have to be. Tom lives across the street. So yes, and I of course go up and down the street spouting zoning on my street, but no. There's a lot of public outreach being done to make sure that we have some good, hopefully we'll have good public participation in all this, because it's all be meaningless if we don't get the public's feedback on ideas that are bouncing around out there. So, okay, anything else? I appreciate you all being here tonight, and your attention, and we'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Somebody second. Thank you. All right. Clark
Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Kevin Hine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye. Chris
Plex, aye.
Great, thanks. And thank you to Carolyn and Lauren and Angela out there. And we'll see you. Our next meeting will be the 19th. We ran into a holiday problem with Yom Kippur, so the meeting on the 5th is off. And so we will see you on the 19th.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
That was good. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.